I want to briefly talk about finance business partnering, really the role of the changing role of finance. So I want to use this session to reflect on a topic that I think is really becoming increasingly important for organizations across all sectors, and that is the role of the finance professional, and more broadly, the growing importance of finance business partnering. For a long time, I think finance has primarily been understood as a function of control, and it was the steward of accuracy, of reporting, of compliance, of discipline, cost management, and it provides the numbers that close the books, manage the control environment, and help organizations preserve value. And that role remains essentially, but in many respects, it remains the bedrock of credibility for the profession. But of course, it's no longer sufficient on its own. The environment in which organizations now operate has changed fundamentally. Businesses today are navigating a world shaped by volatility, complexity, technological disruption, shifting customer expectations, and geopolitical uncertainty, regulatory expansion, and growing stakeholder scrutiny. And in that kind of world, leadership teams do not simply need a finance function that tells them what happened last month. They need a finance function that helps them interpret what is happening now and anticipate what may happen next and support better decision making in real time. And that's the real context in which finance business partnering has emerged as such an important capability. At its best, finance business partnering is not a rebranding exercise. It's not simply a new title for management accounting or commercial finance, but it's a deeper shift in the mandate of finance. It's about finance moving from being a provider of information to becoming a partner in judgment, performance, and value creation. And that distinction is important. Historically, finance has often been um, the strongest at measurement. It has assembled data, validated performance, and reporting outcomes. But the challenge in the modern organization is no longer only measurement. The challenge is interpretation, it's prioritization, it's helping the business understand the drivers behind performance, the trade offs behind decisions, and the risks behind strategic choices, and the implication of acting too slowly or with insufficient insight. And that is why finance business partnering is becoming so central. The business increasingly needs finance not just to count value, but to help shape it. And this requires a significant change in mindset. The traditional image of finance in many organizations has been that of a scorekeeper, uh, careful, rigorous, reliable, but often somewhat removed from the real commercial and operational heartbeat of the business. And in many cases, finance has been seen as the team that reports results, monitors budgets, highlight variances, and explains why something cannot be done. And there's, of course, some truth in that history. But the problem is that if finance remains confined to that role, its risks becoming less relevant at precisely the moment when organizations need it the most. Because in more dynamic and uncertain environments, the real premium is on decision quality, and finance is uniquely positioned to improve the decision quality. And because again, finance sits at the intersection of numbers, of performance, of resource allocation, risk and accountability, and it has visibility across the entire enterprise. It understands the costs, the capital, the return, the trade-offs, and the consequences. It's trained to bring rigor and objectivity into complex situations. Few other functions are as well placed and to connect operational decisions to financial outcomes and strategic choices to economic realities. And that's precisely why the role of finance is expanding. The finance professional of the future is still expected to be technically strong, but it's that definitely doesn't go away. Technical competence, professional discipline, and analytical rigor remains non-negotiables, but those alone are no longer strong enough. Increasing the most valuable finance professionals are those who can combine technical ability with business understanding, commercial judgment, communication skills, and influence. So, in other words, finance is moving from purely technical profession towards a more integrated strategic and leadership role. And this shift is becoming is both exciting and very demanding. It's exciting because it creates an opportunity for finance to operate much closer to the center of organizational decision making. It allows finance to contribute not only to stewardship, but also to strategy, execution, and transformation. It gives finance a stronger voice in how the organization creates and preserves value. But it's demanding because it asks the finance professional to develop capabilities that has not always been central to traditional finance training. Business partnering requires much more than producing a report. It requires understanding the business model deeply enough to know what truly drives performance. It requires engaging with colleagues outside of finance and understanding their pressures, incentives, constraints, and operating realities. It requires the confidence to challenge constructively, the judgment to work with ambiguity, and then the communication skills to translate numbers clearly into compelling insight. And that is a different kind of professional profile. It means that the finance professional of the future needs to be able to move comfortably between language of the boardroom, language of operations, and language of finance. They need to be able to sit with commercial teams, with operational teams, with strategy teams, and execute leadership and contribute in a way that's relevant, practical, and trusted. And that word trust is very important. Trust in finance has traditionally been built around accuracy. So people trust finance because they believe the numbers are right, the controls are robust, and the analysis is objective. But in a business partnering context, trust must go further than that. The business must trust that finance understands the commercial context. It must trust that finance is there to help improve outcomes, not simply constrain activity. It must trust that finance can offer insights, not just oversight. And this is often where the real challenge lies. Many finance teams are still perceived as being too removed from the business, too focused on historical reporting, too comfortable in technical language, and too conscious to engage meaningfully in uncertain or fast-moving decisions. In some organizations, finance is respected but not fully included, and this seems seen as so they're seen as credible but not always as influential. And in that case, then the issue is not only about skill, but it's also about posture, about behavior, and about design. So finance business partnering requires finance to become more embedded in the business. It requires stronger relationships, greater proximity, and more integrated way of working. It means finance cannot remain in a silo and expected to shape decisions from a distance. It has to be present earlier in the conversation. It has to understand issues before they become numbers. It has to move from reporting after the event to help frame choices before the event. And that's again another fundamental change. It also changes what we expect from the finance function itself. For years, finance capacity has been absorbed by um, transaction processing, reporting cycles, reconciliation, controls, administration. And much of that work remains important, but increasingly it should not define the majority of the function's value. Technology is already reshaping the reality. Automation, digital platforms, analytical tools, improving systems, taking over much of the routine work, repeatability, rule-based work that once consumed finance teams. And that creates understandable anxiety in some parts of the profession, but it also creates, again, a major opportunity. As technology takes on more of the profession's burden, finance has the opportunity to move further up the value chain. Less time on transaction handling should mean more time on analysis, challenging, partnering, planning, decision support. Less emphasis on collecting data should mean more emphasis on interpretation of it. Less focus on backward looking reporting should mean focus on forward looking insights. And in that sense, technology is not changing how finance works, but it's accelerating the case for why finance must change. But again, of course, organizations should be careful here. Finance business partnering cannot simply be declared. It has to truly be enabled. It requires clarity of mandate, it requires visible support from leadership, it requires the right operating model, it requires the right investment in skills, it requires organizational willingness to see finance differently. If finance business partners are continually dragged back into transactional work, month-end pressures, or purely administrative tasks, they will never have the time or credibility to operate strategically. So if business leadership still see finance only as the team that cuts budgets and enforces controls, partnerships will definitely remain and be shallow. If finance itself is reluctant to invest in communication, in empathy, and influence, it will struggle to move beyond the technical excellence that it has. So it's not just an individual challenge, it's a leadership and an organizational challenge. And the most effective finance functions of the future will likely be those that combine three things very well. Firstly, they will have to retain a strong technical foundation. Without trust in the numbers, the rest becomes very difficult. Secondly, they will have to embrace technology and smarter operating models that the routine work is handled more effectively and efficiently, and specialists can focus where they can add more value. And thirdly, they will be able to build genuine business partnering capability with finance professionals who understands the business, influence the decisions, challenge constructively, and contribute value to create in a much broader sense. And this combination is very powerful because ultimately finance business partnering is not about making finance softer. It's about making finance more relevant. It's about ensuring that the discipline, the objectivity, the rigor of finance are brought closer to the decisions that shape performance. It's about ensuring that finance helps the organization think better, decide better, and act more with clarity. That's about moving from simply preserving value to actively helping create it. And that's a much bigger role. And I would even go even further. In many organizations, is one of the most important roles. As the external environment becomes more demanding, the quality of internal decision making becomes a differentiator. Organizations that allocate capital better, understand performance better, respond faster, connect strategy more effectively to execution will have a meaningful advantage. And finance has a critical and crucial role to play in all of those areas. So the question for the profession is not whether change is coming. The question has already been answered. The real question is whether finance is willing to step fully into the broader mandate. Are we prepared to move beyond the comfort of technical expertise alone? Are we willing to engage with business more directly? Are we willing to learn language of strategy, operations, and influence? Are we ready to use our insight not just for performance, but to really shape it? Because that ultimately is where the profession is heading. The future of the finance professional will still need to be rigorous, still objective, still technically credible, but they will also need to be commercially aware, strategically engaged, technology enabled, and relationally effective. So, in short, the future of finance is less about finance. It's better finance. It's more connected. It's more influential, and finance that is fully embedded in how the organization creates value. Thank you for listening.